My dad was a great fan of Lake Geneva, as he was actually raised on the lake during the 30s and 40s by his great uncle Garnet McKee, who was founder of our family-owned business called Eclipse. And so my dad became an accomplished sailor as he had great experiences at Lake Geneva as a youth. And then as I grew up, I was exposed to Lake Geneva through boating with my dad here, sailing boats, some power boats. I don't really remember the brand. But one of the interesting stories is a good friend of mine was George Coleman from Rockford. We were classmates, and he had a 12-foot Boston whaler, similar to one that Justin has now. And we used to kick around on a little Boston whaler when we were about 10 years old. So that was my first boating experience, really, was with George on Lake Geneva.
My boating experience was in Lake Delavan, and with power boats and water skiing, but I can't, it's so many years I can't remember the brand name either. And then sailing.
Yeah.
And then when Doug and I met, we were up here in Lake Geneva and we're sailing.
Kind of over the years, you've had, many different boats. So maybe just tell us a little bit about some of the boats you've owned over the years, or any specific ones that, kind of stand out.
Sure. And there's been a real progression as I think about my youth growing up with a Boston whaler, and then moving on to a Mastercraft, which was kind of a river ski boat, and then using the Mastercraft on Lake Geneva, which really having a flat bottom boat on Lake Geneva does not work very well. So as I looked around, I noticed there was a lot of good looking boats on the lake, and it was the Cobalt brand. And I ended up looking at Gordy's, and then deciding through a process to buy my first Cobalt, which was a 25-footer. And since then, I think I've set a record of buying 6 Cobalts from Gordy's. But as we looked at our next steps and what we really wanted to do with our boating experiences in Florida, the Cobalt came up to the top as, especially the A40 with its diesel engines and stuff, as being a good boat to look at for the type of trips we wanted to take around Florida.
So tell us a little about how you first learned of the Great Loop, and what or who inspired you to really want to take on this amazing adventure.
Sure. Well, we're proud to be loopers. Mary and I are both wearing this gold emblem shirt today, which signifies we've completed the loop. And if you ever see this emblem, there's 3 colors. There's a white, a gold, and a titanium color. The white symbolizes that you're in process, or maybe even dreaming of doing the loop. The gold means you've completed it, and titanium means you've done it more than once. So Mary and I just completed the Great Loop this summer, and it's through our interest in boating. When we were looking at our next boat, the A40, we met a Cobalt customer, Lauren Feldner from Chicago. We actually met him down at the Chicago Yacht Club, and he took us out on his boat to give us a little demonstration of what the A40 could do. And he was such a passionate guy about boating. He loved his A40. He loved the Cobalt boat and the way it performed. Anyway, he talked to us about doing the Great Loop someday, and we had never heard of the Great Loop at that point. We didn't really appreciate what he was saying, but he recommended go get a book on it, and actually he had one in his boat that he gave us.
He gave us the same book.
And it's a nice narrative about a husband and wife that actually did the Great Loop too, and so it helped kind of open the door as to what we could possibly do with an A40 if we were to buy one. So as we went through the process of working with Justin of the A40, we ended up buying one which happened to be the coupe design rather than the open top that Lauren had. And the coupe design gave us a little bit more protection from the elements and from the weather, which Mary was looking for over the center console design. Plus it gave you a lot more opportunity to do overnight trips. You could sleep below deck if you wanted to. Or with Mary on board, her preference is actually stopping and going to bed and breakfasts or nice hotels.
That's nice too, it all works.
Yeah. So as Lauren introduced us to the idea of doing the loop, had many friends at Lake Geneva said, yeah, you need to do it. I didn't know that much about overnight boating. My most experience was on Lake Geneva here. And so I had some fears of going on a bigger lake than Lake Geneva. Luckily, And fortunately, through Justin's guidance, he was able to say, well, if you can get an A40, we'll help you out starting it on Lake Geneva. Then why don't you put it on Lake Michigan for summer, and then you can decide if you want to truck it down to Florida, or if you want to take it down the river and start the loop experience. That's your option. And as I started to look into the A40, under the hood is twin 400 horsepower Volvo diesels, a power plant that gets the boat up and out of the water very quickly. And as you start to study the data on these diesel engines, they're very fuel efficient. And I find them to be probably the most fuel efficient engine system, motor system you can get in this size of boat. I've actually taken the boat not only on the Great Loop, but to places like Cuba or the Bahamas, and she's proven to be a real reliable boat in those kinds of waters.
Maybe tell us a little bit about some of your process in planning.
Justin was a great
for
aid
the trip
in
or
pointing
for
out
legs.
things that we need if you're going to take a trip like going down Illinois River and the Mississippi River. If you're thinking about those types of adventures, there's certain things you want to take with you, and that's where having Justin, the Gordy team involved, really helped me a lot in describing what you should expect and what you can get for help and service as you go on those types of trips. And without that kind of support, these trips can be a lot more difficult. I had some fraternity brothers that actually volunteered to go with me down the rivers to Naples, and it was more fun having guys that I went to college with for 40 years ago get back on this boat, and we had more fun than you can imagine. All ahead, we'd figure out what time of day was the best to get through the locks, and there's 8 locks going through the Illinois River, and it took us 2 days to get through there, which was probably the longest part of our trip because of the delays at the locks, which was the end of September, October. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of barges going downriver with grain from the farms and stuff, so that's why that was a particularly longer part of the trip for us.
And when you were planning those legs, Doug, were you looking at the waterway guide? Were you using online resources or from friends that have done it before experience, or kind of all combined to kind of look at your routing and timing and the locks that you had to go through, or what were some of the tools, I guess, that helped you along kind of planning as you planned your next leg or whatnot?
So I had a good friend down in Naples, Peter Schmidt, that had done this trip 2 years before I did it, and he had a logbook that he showed me where he stopped and how far he progressed each day. So I used that as my template to do the first 2 legs, which was from Chicago then down to Naples. That was a good aid. And then also the other aids I'd recommend besides the Garmin Master Helm, I use Navionics, which is on my iPhone and my iPad, and I'm a big believer in that for pre-trip planning. It can show you the route, the mileage, how much fuel consumption, things like that.
Planning the trip, kind of talking about time frame, when you're originally starting to plan or think about the trip, were you thinking of it in sort of a continuous, some people do it just start and then they just kind of keep going on, or were you thinking of kind of breaking it up into sections, and did you have a kind of time frame in mind, or was it just kind of no pressure, go as you go, or what was your kind of original thinking of the time frame, how to break it up? Obviously going to Chicago to Naples, stopping your place there, but then kind of the whole loop.
Yeah, another mentor that helped me with this trip is a gentleman from Rockford by the name of Chuck Thomas, who also lives on Lake Geneva. And Chuck had completed the loop about 10 years ago in a bigger boat, and he said it was really a fun trip for he and his family. Particularly, he broke it into many legs, and that allowed him to bring different crew members on in different places. And so he actually did his trip over a 1-year period and laid his boat up at various places. So as I got to thinking about my trip, I saw the opportunity to do it in 1-week legs was probably a good routine for the lifestyle that Mary and I have in terms of needing to get back to take care of our dogs or to see our kids or to do different activities. So our first loop, half of the loop from Kenosha down to Naples actually was 2 1-week legs. And then coming back up from Naples up the East Coast and back up through the Hudson River and behind Toronto was 5 1-week legs.
Yeah. some people kind of get in their head they got to just keep going the whole thing, but breaking it up into chunks really makes it easier and just more manageable really when you think about it that way.
Another attribute of the Cobalt boat, because of its size, it's easy to find slips for it. It's not. It's easy to cover up, to leave it for a period of time. Mm-hmm. And if you even want to take it out of the water, that's easy to do too. Right. If it needs any type of cleaning or any type of maintenance work, taking it out of the water was very easy to do. Particularly the height restrictions that you have to deal with for the bridges is important. And I didn't really appreciate that till we did this trip, but I believe our overall height out of the water is about 14 feet. And it seems like most bridges come down to about 15 feet. So we were able to get under most of the bridges. I think we only had 1 or 2 bridge stops. Between Mary and my brother-in-law Roger, I would send them up onto the bow to see if we had enough height to get underneath the bridges. And the one you're talking about was the one up in Canada. Yeah. And outside of Midland there. And it was close. And so we ended up figured, Mary goes, it's not worth it. It's not worth it.
We'll be laid up for a week or more.
Lose your radar.
For 15-minute wait.
Yeah.
So we powered back and just enjoyed the scenery for about 15 minutes, and then the bridge operator opened the bridge. I think it was at 9 o'clock in the morning too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they opened every half an hour, so it wasn't a long wait.
Lockmasters were helpful too. And in Canada, most of them are young kids, and they help telling you how much further you have to go, and you better get there by this time. And
they open at 9 in the morning and they close at 5. And if you're not there before 5, you're not going to get a lift that day. So you have to know your timing to each lift. It's important that if you think you're going to be close to 5, that you call and let them know your timing. And in some cases, they will stay over if they need to. It's the people you meet and the time you spend with the people you care about that means the most on this trip, to me and to Mary. We started the trip with 2 fraternity brothers, Tom Trinnell and John Sturmer, and we're all Colorado ATOs from Fort Collins, Colorado, where we spent 4 years of studying and skiing and doing other things, not boating. But anyway, we got together and decided to do this at least half the loop together, and we took off, and we slept on board every night and had a great time cooking, washing dishes, navigating the rivers, and telling stories for 2 weeks. As we got up the East Coast, the further north you get, the more interesting it is. The more history there is, the more little places you can go to, and it was a really great experience from Annapolis on up north through the Chesapeake Bay and the Delaware River, and then on up in the Hudson River. The experience bringing Mary on board was nice because I finally had an opportunity to really share the day-to-day routine with her, which I enjoyed a lot, and I think she grew to appreciate as we made the journey. We had some emergency maintenance work to do when we were in Annapolis. I'll have to say the Volvo Penta system is fantastic for response time. We had some issues that were out of the ordinary, and they were able to respond very quickly. We got the boat out of the water. We actually hit a crab pot. It's something that's going to happen to every boater, and when it happens, you want to be able to respond quickly to it. And we tested the Volvo Penta service network a couple different places, and we always found them to be very responsive and wanting to help, willing to help, and get the boat back in the water as quickly as possible.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, doing a 6,000 plus mile journey, I mean, you're bound to have some issues along the way, and I think having that support along the way, knowing that you have that support is certainly key. So
the Trent Severn Canal is a wonderful waterway. It's 250 miles connecting rivers and lakes that run from Lake Ontario over to the Georgian Bay. And they have 42 locks that were built in the early 1900s. And there's several of them that are very unique for their engineering design. One's a big bathtub that actually can lift 5 boats out of the water at one time. Wow. Lifts you up, and then they open the gate and you drive on out. And then the other side of the lift
Teeter-totter.
is like a teeter-totter. It hydrostatically lowers or rises depending on how much water they let into each side of the bathtub.
Wow.
And it's a engineering marvel to see. There's actually 2 of those types of lifts on the Trent Severn.
Wow.
So that week was very special for Mary and I. We laid the boat up at Lake Simcoe for 2 weeks, and on the way out we were able to visit Toronto, and our one regret is we didn't get to Niagara Falls yet, but someday we'll get there. On the next and last leg, we invited my sister Wendy Fisher and her husband Roger, and they also live on Lake Geneva and great boaters up here. And they had a great time moving on forward through the Georgian Bay into the North Channel and through Mackinac Island down to Killarney. Fabulous boating areas. And then moving on down to Door County, where we picked up 2 of the best Gordy guys you ever want to meet.
Not about the best, but yeah, the most fun.
Tom and Justin, and you made the last day with us from actually Sister Bay on down to Kenosha.
Maybe talk from your side, flying out there, jumping on board, me and Doug's crew.
Yeah.
Just having fun on that leg up the coast.
I think landed around 11:30 p.m. and then, it was lights out. We were up early the next morning on the water, probably at 6:30, and it was kind of a neat start. And by this time, Doug was pretty seasoned, right? He had everything kind of down. Like, okay, this is what we're doing. This is where we're going. But it was fun. It was a neat day. We went out Myrtle Beach, went out in the ocean, ran for a little while, and then we tucked back in and came up in the Outer Banks and some really neat areas to boat through. And from there, we just kind of picked a port going north every night. One thing that I learned was kind of neat was he really had good flexibility with an app called Dakwa, and he would kind of look at, okay, we can stop here, 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 and really it's not written in stone, right? You feel like if you want to go a little farther, you can get on the app, make the reservation, and your slip's there waiting for you. So that was kind of a neat way to see how he had figured that out, and just kind of using this technology to make it really simple.
Tell us a little about, you mentioned one area you were in. I think there was, I don't know if there was a lot of logs or it was on a river section or section. There was a lot of kind of technical navigation, right, around wood, floating wood,
Yeah.
and how where that was and how you managed that. Just kind of tell us that story a little bit.
I decided to turn the helm over to Justin.
The captain's fault of being anything, right?
I think we were just leaving Annapolis in the Chesapeake Bay, and I wanted Justin to have a little experience at the helm, so you can finish the rest of the story.
Yeah, so we were heading all the way to the top of the Chesapeake Bay, where it kind of ends, the Elk River comes in, and we're not sure if it had been high water or what, but there was a ton of cut timber in the water, just trails and trails of it. And so it was all 3 of us actually on patrol, watching, and we would say, hey, big log, half submerged, we'd cut to port or cut to starboard. And that was probably a good hour of us doing that, but it was great. Everybody was helping, and we made it through, right? And we got on our cut and went through Delaware and popped down the Delaware River, and then we had a great cruise down the Delaware River, came in the backside, the west side of Cape May, New Jersey, and I think that was a
nice
really
night
neat
there,
place.
yeah.
Yeah, everyone really appreciated Cape May. It's kind of a cool find.
So can you tell us a little about maybe how someone special was kind of looking down on you on the trip and some things that kind of stood out to you, guys, as you made the journey?
Yeah, we definitely had some help, some different places, and we saw some telltales. We talked about Lauren Feldner, who unfortunately is no longer with us, but Lauren's second Cobalt that he owned was a 343, which was kind of a really neat boat that they built with a stepped hull and performance oriented. And as we were coming into Atlantic City, we looked over to our right, and about a mile out, there's this black kind of dart coming at us. And I'm looking at the boat, and thinking, wow, it looks a lot like a Cobalt 343. What are the odds? And the guy ended up pulling in right in front of us as we're going into the main channel coming into Atlantic City. And then we had to go up and make a turn to port to go to our harbor. He was turning to port, and he's actually in the same marina that we were. And so Doug said, let's go down and chat with him quick. So he was tying up his boat. We took the A40 down and just asked him how he liked the boat, told him a little story about a friend of ours who was kind of the inspiration for the trip. And that was very unique. There's 40 of those boats, I think, in the world, and I don't know how many are black. And the fact to see one that guy doing like that was pretty incredible. And
That's amazing. The odds of that, it's very unique.
And then this is kind of neat too. At the end of our week, we were going into a restaurant up in Long Island Sound, and we were walking down the pier to this restaurant, and there was a black open A40, same design and color as Lauren's, just parked there at the pier, the only boat on the pier, which we thought was kind of neat. So the odds that we saw both of his boats, which are, you know, not that prevalent, was pretty neat.
That's amazing.
So
Yeah.
Doug and I both, and Mary, were kind of like, wow, it feels like Lauren's, you know.
With us, right?
Yeah,
This,
with us.
this trip's
Showing
meant to
stuff.
be, right? This trip's meant to be.
He inspired us to do the trip, and then sadly he passed away last year. And he was also the motivator for us to complete the loop, because we were down in Naples with this boat, and I said, you know, Mary, when are we going to do this? When are we going to complete the loop? And I go, you know, poor Lauren's passed away. Let's not let that happen to us. Let's do it. And Mary agreed, so we launched in May of 2019 to complete the second half of the loop.
But are there certain areas that maybe stood out to you as really special, or ones that you would really like to go back to visit again someday?
Yeah, I think the one that is most impressionable is when we pulled into New York Harbor, and there's a great photo of Mary making a toast to the Statue of Liberty with her Gordy's jacket on.
Love it.
And I think the hair on the back of my neck was up. I know everybody had goosebumps from going into those waters there. And then from the Statue of Liberty, we motored over to the marina next to the World Trade Center. And we were able to get front row parking there that was just spectacular. And Justin was still on board, and we were able to get off downtown Manhattan, spend 3 or 4 hours walking around, had a great time there. Got back in the boat and buzzed on up the East River, out in the Long Island Sound, went up to Mattatuck to Strong's Marina.
Were there other areas that were some of your most challenging or difficult that stood out to you along the way?
I think one of the interesting stories to tell is when we were coming from the Illinois River to the Mississippi. It is one of the most unusual experiences seeing this big river called the Mississippi. It's wide, it's dirty, there's debris in it, it's brown muddy water, and it runs fast. There's a big current in the Mississippi. A lot of people don't really appreciate that until you're actually in a boat going into the river. And as I learned the hard way, as you're going from the Illinois River into the Mississippi, there's a cement wing dam, and the Mississippi was 2 feet above normal stage. We didn't see the wing dam. There happens to be a big billboard, though, on the side of the river before you enter this waterway. Beware of the wing dam. Well, we ended up hitting it with our boat. It wiped out our starboard prop. We had to pull the starboard prop up. Fortunately, we have 2 lower units, so we motored down on the port engine for about 100 miles to where we pulled over and met some divers that eventually repaired the props, replaced the props for us. Also thankful for Gordy's in the sense that the next stop, we were able to get the boat out of the water. They lined up a dealer down on Pickwick Lake that was able to get the boat out of the water, checked to make sure the lower units were aligned correctly, made all the repairs that were necessary, and got the boat back in water very quickly. Yeah, one of the great things about this boat is if the weather windows are good, you can get anywhere you want to in a short amount of time. From Naples to Key West is about 100 miles, so I go to Key West quite frequently in this boat. The A40 has a good top end speed. If you want to cruise at 40 miles an hour, it's not a problem. And it's a good ocean boat. She'll ride the waves. She stays on top of the water really good.
Just kind of finishing the Great Loop, so maybe talk a little bit about the final leg, the finish line. Was there any sort of sadness that it was over? Sort of, I've done this, but it's over. Tell us a little about your final leg there and the finish line.
Well, it was an amazing thing, and to have you guys on there and champagne after. I was looking forward to get back to my dogs, but I was ready to get off. But after we got home a couple days, it was like, well, what are we going to do?
Yeah, I give Tom and Justin a lot of credit in terms of relationships. You guys thought it was important enough to meet us up in Sister Bay, so you drove up 6-8 hours to be there the night before our last leg. And I think that's really special. part of the unique relationship that Gordy's has with their boating customers is this one-on-one interaction, which is so important.
And thank you for giving us the opportunity to join you on that final leg. That was really special for us after making that 6,000 mile plus journey, plus the Cuba and Bahama trip, and to really put an exclamation point on that. And it was certainly our honor and pleasure. And we're very grateful to have the opportunity to make the finish line with you and celebrate in true fashion with a bottle of Verve in Lauren's honor that we enjoyed with him out in Lake Michigan, and also a nice bottle of Cobalt wine as well. So.
You know, leaving the next morning from Sister Bay down to Kenosha, it was a great trip, though. The waters were nice coming down Green Bay, and we made Sturgeon Bay in pretty good time, and we got through the locks, or not the locks, but the canal there, and then going out to Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan is probably the roughest waters that I've ever been on, and that trip down the shoreline was fast, convenient. We had the wind at our back, which was nice, but it was big seas. I mean, it was 3 to 5 foot rolling seas, and you're out there, choppy waters, and we did it without any problem.
But there's a lot of people out there like us that dream of doing the Great Loop someday as boaters, and I think from your experience, obviously you accomplished it, and what an amazing accomplishment it is. What advice, recommendation, suggestion would you give someone just considering or thinking about seriously doing it? What would be some of your comments?
I like what Lauren helped us with is he gave us a book. The Waterway Guide is also excellent. Talking to people that have done it is probably the most helpful. And then possibly recruiting somebody to travel with you on one of those legs to help you get started. You have a lot of fear of the unknown, and until you do it, you don't know what you're missing.
Right, amazing experience.
Because of the size of the boat, the 40-foot size gives you a lot of comfort when you travel. It's a very reliable power plant engine system. The boat's comfortable to be in. It's got 3 TVs. Air conditioning is important once you get south. Heating is important once you get north. It's got all the amenities to make it a comfortable trip. When you want to go fast, you go fast. When you want to go slow, you can go slow. You have the ability to put it up out of the water at a relatively lower cost than if you had a big boat. So there's a lot of good reasons to look at the A40 for that type of travel.
Is there anything else, I guess the last question, is there anything else that you'd like to share about the Great Loop, about your trip, your time on the boat, your time on the trip, people, anything about the trip at all that you'd like to share that we haven't covered yet today?
You get to see a part of the United States, a part of our lifestyle that is pretty unique. The waterway system has been there for hundreds of years, and the waterway systems is the way we traveled before we had railroad, and those systems are still there, and it's a lot of history, a lot of unique places to see, a lot of unique things to do. So I'd recommend this kind of trip for just about anybody that likes to boat, has some time availability and the resources to do it, of course.
So Doug, just talking more about the Loop Association and your shirts, a little bit about that organization and kind of what they do and what they offer.
Yeah, I suggest anybody that's interested in doing the Great Loop that they go to the website for the AGLC, and that stands for American Great Looper Cruising Association. And they have a great website, and on their website you can see the route for the Great Loop, which is a big aid. It's an interactive routing, which helps. You can also register yourself as a member. There's many postings throughout the whole loop area that shows you if there's any issues with the waterways, if there's problems with navigation, they'll let you know. But anyway, I'd recommend to anybody wanting to do the Great Loop that they look into this website and joining this association. It's kind of interesting, some of the facts is it's 6,000 nautical miles to do the Great Loop, and more people climb Mount Everest in a year than actually complete the loop.
Wow.
So that's how they describe it when you join the American Great Loop Cruisers Association.
I just want to thank Doug and Mary for their support in doing the trip and being adventurous that they are. And I think it takes a lot to say you're going to go off and do this when you haven't had any experience outside of maybe the Midwest or local lake boating. So my hat's off to you guys. It's really a cool accomplishment, and I also think they did it really, did it in grace. Really, it was fun spending that week with them, and they're fun to travel with, and made it a neat experience. So.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Mary. Appreciate all your time today, sharing the story. What an amazing story. Appreciate all your continued support. Gordy's and Cobalt and Bubble Penta, and we certainly look forward to great times together as we go forward in the future too. So our next great adventure, right?
Right.
So thank you very much. Appreciate it.